symptoms in the body. Now, if the parasympathetic comes online, let's take your digestive tract. Your goblet cells, which secrete mucus in the digestive tract for bowel transient and also for absorption and assimilation and elimination, increase secretion. So you get extra mucus, extra serous fluids, your peristaltic action, your circular and longitudinal muscles stimulate, and you get a bowel transient time that speeds up. So now you have a more loose, faster paced, less condensed, softer stool, which is a symptom of a parasympathetic response. When you do, the parasympathetic nervous system uses primarily acetylcholine as one of the transmitters, but anything that supports your values also activates estrogen. It activates oxytocin, vasopressin, enkephalins, endorphins, dopamine, and there's a whole lot of chemicals, and serotonin. And all these compounds make you have different physiology. These compounds, depending on whether they're water soluble or fat soluble, will create what is called a cell receptor second messenger stimulation at the cell wall, or go right inside to the cytoplasm and into the nucleus in some cases. Some steroid hormones go right in. All fat soluble systems can penetrate the cell and cause change. All water solubles activated at the cell wall. And they cause a secondary messenger and a tertiary cascade of various acetylations on various parts of the protein manufacturing process, either at the DNA level or at the RNA level or at the nuclear pore level or at the ribosome level or the Golgi apparatus or the transport out to the cell wall for the secretion of the protein or the incorporation of the protein inside cytoskeletal structures. But it will then change the cell physiology based on that perception. You cannot change your perception without changing physiology. Now, let me give you an example. Inside the cell, you have what is called kinesin molecules, and you have another compound called dynein molecule. Pull up your phone. Pull up your phone for a second. And see if you can find dynein molecule. D-Y-N-E-I-N or something like that. Yeah. Dynein is a signal molecule, a protein that moves along microtubules that carry materials from the cell wall down into the nucleus. And dynein is activated by the parasympathetic nervous system. It transports various cellular cargoes and to help in mitosis. So in other words, whenever you're relaxed, dynein takes materials from the cell wall and takes it into the nucleus, and we need those materials to be building new proteins and putting lipids and fatty acids on them to make lipoproteins and glycoproteins to then be transported back. But when we're under very parasympathetic, mitosis increases because we take the compounds from the periphery of the cell and bring it into the central part of the cell. But if we get under distress and we have the sympathetic side, we get norepinephrine, epinephrine, we get a completely different set of cascades. And then we have kinesin molecules that take the material from mitosis because it shuts down mitosis and brings it back out to the cell wall. And then we use that for defense to protect the cell. And the same thing in your physiology. When you're under parasympathetic, the blood supply comes out from the periphery, your external muscles, and goes into your smooth muscles for digestive purposes, for building anabolic behavior. And when you're under distress, it stops the digestive system, drives up the mucus secretions, drives up the circular and transverse and longitudinal muscles, and goes out to the periphery and tightens up the tension in the body. So you cannot have a support without the parasympathetic doing those two things, or challenge without the sympathetic doing it. And now, whenever you do that and you get parasympathetic, you get acetylation and you get what is called epigenetic alterations of the genes expression. And therefore, slight different proteins come about. And when slight proteins are come about, you also get transpositions, and transpositions are modified genes. Tonight, I'm having dinner with the founder of gene therapy and the CRISPR system, the founder of the 2 Nobel Prize winners. We're having dinner tonight, my girlfriend and I. We're going to be talking on epigenetics and genes tonight. But whenever you do that, you're literally altering genetic expression, and that's not random. The idea of random mutations is a farce. These things have an order to them that we don't comprehend, and they're autonomically driven, and they're there for a purpose to create symptoms to guide physiology back into homeostasis. But it's misinterpreted because our society lives in a fantasy of wanting to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So most treatment in medicine is palliative, not curative. Let me understand that. It's palliative. It's balancing out outer chemistry to get rid of symptoms, but getting rid of symptoms are not evil. Symptoms are not illness. Symptoms can be a sign of health. Raise your hand if you've ever pigged out and had a bellyache and nausea and farts and cramps and the shits or whatever. Those symptoms are feedback mechanisms to know that you're a little fucking piggy. You're oinky. You have no control of your fucking pig reaction. And why is that caused? Raise your hand if you ever get under distress. Some people overeat, some people undereat. Watch this. Watch the hands of those of you that overeat when you're under distress. Put your hands up. And those that undereat when you're distressed, put your hands up. That's what they call leptin for undereating and ghrelin for overeating. So anytime you have imbalanced systems, you throw those out of whack. Because ghrelin is a parasympathetic transmitter or hormone, and the sympathetic is leptin. So these are mechanisms to stop eating when you're under distress and eat when you're under relaxation. Now, if you balance out your autonomics, you have wellness. So if you're infatuous with somebody, if you find the downsides, if you're resentful to somebody, you find the upsides, you have wellness. You bring your physiology back to balance. That's why the DeMartini method in the breakthrough experience has had numerous people come and said, my health issue just disappeared. There's been hundreds and hundreds of those cases throughout the years I've been doing this, which is totally understandable. So does that help, Amelia? I did a cursory example of that.
Yes.
Perfect. Now, if you go to Prophecy 2, the manual in Prophecy 2, you'll see that there's a section there under autonomics, and I go through every cell in the body and what the autonomics does to that cell. So you can go and review that if you want to. And remember, every health condition or illness is a combination of psychological complexes creating multiple cell imbalances that are interpreted or misinterpreted as health or disease. It's both illness. If you come from the allopathic perspective, it's called illness. And now you take a counterbalancing transmitter to balance it. Most drugs are signal molecules counterbalancing behaviors of the autonomics. Inhibitors are, facilitators of various transmitters. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Mike. Mike, would you like me to read it, or if you'd like to unmute yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Elena. Afternoon, Dr. DeMartini. So my question is, what are your thoughts on things like precognition, past life regression, out-of-body experience, and how might these things relate to this or to the essence of a soul?
Okay, good question. Out of life or out of body experiences are typically, and the ones that I've gotten to do, well, let's put it this way. I've talked to many people who've had out of body experiences, and the ones I've gotten to have good dialogues with and ask questions to has given me the belief that most of these are dissociative states, just dissociations. And most of those out-of-body experiences, unless there's two types. One is a transcendent state, which is not a dissociative state, where you're just transcending in a deep meditation and you're kind of not attached to a form whatsoever, and you're in perfect equilibrium. And that's sort of you're not aware of your body for a moment. And that's not what most people define as an out-of-body experience. Most people that are describing out-of-body experience, I find, are dissociative states. Now, dissociative states come from what is called the freeze response, which is a parietal temporal junction activation, an area that causes what is called hyperreligiosity. This area, if you stimulate it with magnetic stimulation of the brain, will give people repeatedly. I could take a magnetic stimulator in any one of your brains and hit that junction right now and have you all think that you're out, you just left your body. They've done this and proven this in various types of stimuli. And that is exactly the same area that lights up under a freeze response. And the freeze response is when you can't fight something, you can't flight something, you freeze. In other words, your self-righteous persona, if somebody challenges you and you feel superior to them, you'll fight them. If your self-righteous persona is activated and you're inferior to them, you'll flight them. If you can't fight or flight them, you'll freeze and act like a possum and act dead. It's a freeze response. And the freeze response takes the content of whatever you're frightened of and creates the anti-content, which is a dissociation from the content that you're frightened of. So you associate with the anti-content. It's called an anti-memory. And I've done enough of these, hundreds of these, to feel pretty confident in saying that this anti-memory is a composite opposite of whatever you're perceiving. So if I take an out-of-body experience and watch the body language and the eye movements of the person, because it's very popular to read a book on out-of-body experience and then just make up shit. And you see this quite often. You see a whole bunch of kind of new age people making up shit that they had this out-of-body experience, and you can see they're constructing it by the way they're positioning their eyes, and they're just making it up. And if you then record it and ask them a year later, I guarantee it won't be the same, because they're just making it up on the spot. But if it's a real dissociation and it's a, quote, perceived torture or tragedy or trauma or turmoil or terrible traumatic event, they will, in their minds, because that's all perceptual, it has nothing to do with that event. All events are neutral until somebody misperceives it that way. But if they dissociate from that and create a freeze response, the content of the out-of-body will be the anti-content of whatever they're perceiving. So if they perceive darkness, they'll see light. If they perceive constraint, they'll see freedom. And whatever's been in their life from the time they're a child to that day that's stored in the subconscious mind that is associated, because these are association states, dissociation states, that associate with the opposite behavior will bring up an image of that in their mind. And so some people, if you actually deconstruct what they say at their out-of-body experience, I can show you very clearly that that comes from another side of their perceptions that is stored in the subconscious mind that's traumatized or tortured, particularly if it's pleasurable. But it can work the other way. You cannot have an ecstatic mechanism without having an anxiety in the opposite direction. So that's why people taking heroin in this ecstatic mode will also have this paranoia and fear and the opposite of whatever they're perceiving in their state. These are pairs of opposites. The mind cannot have one without the other, but one's conscious, the other's unconscious. Unless you ask the right questions, then you can become conscious of both of them. So out-of-body experiences that have any form of elation or depression are a result of some polarized state, and they're really association-dissociation phenomenon. And it's not hard to prove. It's quite easy to prove, and it only takes about a half hour to show it to them. And then once they see a few of them, they just go, oh shit. And many people get lost in thinking it's a previous life, or it could be anything. Because if they perceive their father torturing them and their mother was the overprotector and supporter, they may see their mom talking to them in the afterlife, as an example. So these are, or vice versa. If their mom was infatuated with and they all of a sudden, are missing the mommy all of a sudden, they can have tortures of all of a sudden the opposite. So I've seen both of these and I've deconstructed these and taken the story that this was an out of body or a previous existence or previous life. So I'd have to say that most of the previous life experiences have been dissociations, association phenomenon. And what I do is I try to deconstruct that and point that out to them, and then they see it. But I can't prove, the only time I feel that there might be a real continuation is if there's grace. So you might want to write this down. This is part of my experience program, so hopefully you come to that someday. If you can endure me. When you have tears of inspiration, tears of grace, we'll call it, which I call gratitude, tears of love, tears of inspiration, tears of enthusiasm, tears of presence, tears of certainty. These are all the transcendental states. My drawing is sloppy as hell. Let me try it again. These transcendental states, these tears of grace, raise your hand if you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get a tear of grace, you get a chill up the spine, and you just know that you know with certainty there's something right now guiding you. Those are signs of the authentic self. To me, that's the only guide I've used in my research in life. If I don't get that, I don't incorporate that as something I know with certainty. Those have been the key guides to my research. So then you have what is called the polarized emotional feelings. These are the synthesized transcendental feelings. A synthesized transcendental feelings is a synthesis of synchronicity of all pairs of opposites of emotions. And this is joy and sorrow and happy and sad and elation and depression and infatuation and resentment, right? And attraction and repulsion, admiration, despise, whatever you want to call it. These are called polarized. These are monopoled states of positive without negative or negative without positive. They don't exist. The only way they can exist is in the delusion of the mind that is conscious of the positive and unconscious the negative, taken to infinity. Or down below, this is conscious the negative, unconscious the positive, taken to infinity. Now, if somebody comes to me and they're describing a out-of-body experience, or they're describing a previous life experience, if they have any emotions whatsoever, it's bullshit. It's just a fabrication of their mind, and it's usually some sort of dissociation state. And this is the most common. These things are like common as hell. And a lot of false books are promoting out there, and people get into it and they come up with all kind of crazy stuff out of it. If there's anything that's a previous life, please make a note of this. The only thing that's immortal, that is soul, that transcends time, space and time, is this grace state. Now, if you stop and look at what you have in your life, you only have moments of grace on a very small occasion. just small moments. So you gradually accumulate in your evolution these authentic gray states. And so the evolution of the soul is a slow process. So this journey from the inauthentic self to the authentic self, in every moment, in the present moment, we have the gray state. So if there's emotions in the story that they're running about a previous life or in the out-of-body experience, if there's any emotions, if it's any polarization, you know it's made up in their head, and I can deconstruct it. And it's easy to deconstruct, and I've done it on the spot in breakthroughs number of times. And it usually sets them up really quick, and their story just all of a sudden dissolves. But what happens is that people that are out in the New Age movement and the metaphysical movement, they like to promote things that are irrational, and it sells. And the more it sells, usually the more delusioned it is. And so people then follow that, and then they think that there's, you know, a one-sided bliss. By the way, this is called a utopia, and this is called a dystopia. If you look at what utopia means, you'll find it quite interesting. Utopia, oops, I didn't spell it right. Try it again. Utopia means a place that doesn't exist. See if I can get the definition of here. Oop. Oop. Etymology. The etymology means not place, a place that doesn't exist. U means no, not, and place. Topia means topical place. So utopias are fantasy places in people's minds. Dystopias are nightmare places in people's minds. And religion is noted for this. The hell and the underworlds are the dystopias, and the heavens and the worlds are the utopias. All bliss, all torture. These are psychotic. That's why the lowest level of religious understanding is the idea of a punishing, rewarding hell or heaven. That's the political and theological construct of the opium of the masses, creating a fantasy in people's minds. The true heaven is a state of grace when you see right here the perfect balance of opposites. And the true hell is when you're in disgrace and you're trying to change others relative to you or trying to change you relative to others. That's hell. Life is hell. It's futile. You don't have to get too esoteric about it. Now, did I answer the question now on those?
Yes, it did. Thank you
by
very
the way,
much.
by the way, if you do the DeMartini method and you ask the right questions and equilibrate the mind and become present, I say go to the moment where and when you perceive. It's in the moment of perception that the conscious and unconscious split. Everybody write that somewhere. It's in the moment of perception where the conscious and unconscious split. And perception is the phenomenological world. So at the moment of perception, as you make the perception and as you start your judgment, that's where you have the highest probability of being able to integrate the unconscious with the conscious and have access to the transcendental state. That's why living by your highest values is so crucial, because you're most present in your highest values. How many agree when you're doing what you love and love what you do, you're most engaged and most present? That's why I talk about the value applications. All right, let's make a copy of this. I want to do something on soulmates real quick.
Got it.
I'll do, or unless you do one of the last questions, and then I'll do soulmates. That's fine. What's the next question?
There's two questions. If you'd like to address, next is Lloyd, and then
Yep.
Sean. Lloyd, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, Dr. DeMartini. You're talking earlier about things occupying space and time in our mind. I'm just wondering, is that why we dream about things? Because they're occupying space and time?
Oh, that's a good question. Unless you're eating curry, I'm joking, or extremely spicy foods. The purpose of dreams, from what I can tell, is to integrate the memory and anti-memories, the conscious and unconscious minds, to liberate you from the bondage of those running your mind. And every night, how many of you had a night where you didn't sleep and you never got into REM sleep, and you never integrated your dreams, and you felt trashed and drained? But every night you get dreams and you integrate them and integrate the parts. If you actually woke up and stopped in the middle of your dream and looked at the content, you'll see it's based on the it's the anti-content of what you've perceived during the days that have been stored in the subconscious mind trying to clear itself. So the purpose of dreams is to clear the subconscious baggage. That's why sleeping is so refreshing, because you feel revitalized, re-inspired by the next day if you've got a really good quality sleep. Because what it's doing is whatever you, and let me give you an example of it. There's a young boy, there's a very extraordinary boy named Amit, who I met about 11 years ago. His parents brought him to me, and I met him at the Delta Hotel, I believe, in Calgary. And the parents said he was complaining of nightmares. And I asked the son to communicate through the father, because he had to do it with this little device because he was autistic, a child, kind of an autistic state, and he had difficulty communicating. So he would do it and point to letters on a little piece of plastic. And he communicated what he was experiencing in one of his nightmares. And I looked at that and I deconstructed that right down the spot. I just wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I could tell right away what it was. It didn't take about 8 minutes to figure out what was going down, because he was having nightmares over it again. And I said, and when did it start? It started about a month ago. And he's been having nightmares almost every day for the last month. And I said, good. I think I found the solution. They said, what's the solution? I said, how many people does he interact with on an average day? He says he's only really interacts with 3 people. Okay. So the mother, the sister of her mother, and the father, husband. That's basically it, mother and father. And so he's bombarded by them. And they went, a month ago, they went to some psychiatrist or some psychologist, I think, that told him that you should feed him only positive thinking, only say positive things to him, to raise his self-esteem, to give him hope of being not the way he is or whatever, which is just ridiculous. And I'm not against positive thinking if you're down, but you need negative thinking if you're up to get yourself into balanced thinking. But the moment they started that 1 month earlier, I said, when did you start that? And they looked at each other going, a month ago. I said, stop it immediately. Because he doesn't have anybody around him that plays out the challenge role, he's having to create an alter persona to give him the challenge inside his head. The content is counterbalancing it. So in the process of doing that, I didn't know this, but this child was quite adept. The next night he dreamed, and the next day he got up and communicated to his dad through this little device and told his dad what the content of the dreams were and the content of where the source of the dreams were and what was said to him previously. And he analyzed it and wrote it out. The father wrote it out and sent it to me. And I said, man, if Freud was alive today, he'd roll over in his grave and read this thing. It was amazing. It's the most amazing analysis of your mind that I'd ever seen. And it confirmed the idea of these pairs of opposites. But what's typically taught out there, and this is what I think that psychology is in the dark ages on, and I want you to write this, and I want to declare this, because I'm starting DeMartinian psychology because of this. You know, if fucking Freud can do it and Jungian can do it, I might as well do a DeMartinian one. But what's going down in the psychology today is people are listening to people's fucking story. And the story is only the conscious portion. Let me understand that. And so they're believing the story. They're believing the victim. They're believing this happened, or they're believing the story. I don't do that. I'm not interested in your story. I'm interested in how the brain works and how your psychology works and integrating the brain. And I had a guy the other day said, well, that's not kind to people. They need to be able to express themselves. I said, no, because if you express what you're elated about, you're repressing what you're depressed about. If you're expressing what you're depressed about, if you're expressing what you're depressed about, you're repressing what you're elated about. So I don't want one-sided systems. I want both sides, and they center themselves. And then the dreams go away. That's why if I take the dream, deconstruct it, find the antiparticles in their life, dissolve the charge on that with the DiMartini method, like we do in the breakthrough experience, and the dreams disappear. Poof, repeated dreams just disappear. So it's the dream is anti-content, trying to find its opposite to integrate so you can have your soul's expression. Please make a note of this. Your brain is a telos, highest value seeking and fulfilling organ. It's attempting to get your androgyny. It's attempting to have temporal and spatial entanglement. It's trying to integrate them. So whatever the content of your perception, the anti-content's always there. And the speed in which you see it determines your level of your conscious evolution. If you're slow in seeing it, you're going to be highly fundamental. If you're very fast in seeing it, you're going to be very aware. I try to be as aware as I can, but sometimes I react. Whenever I see, hot supermodel mermaids, I sometimes take a moment to find the downsides.
Downside of mermaids?
Pardon me?
Downside of mermaids?
Yeah, the mermaids have downsides. I know it took me a while. It was hard for me at first.
All right, that's awesome. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good. Next question, last question. I need to get
John,
into soul.
actually, they deferred, and if you'd like to jump into the soulmates, because it is 10 minutes to 5.
It is.
It is.
Okay, well, we'll take a 5-minute break because if it's 10 to 5, I'll give you a 5-minute break at that time and we'll go for another 10 hours. Is that right?
Perfect. That makes sense.
By the way, how many of you can imagine what it's like to have to be a child in my family? Would you agree that that's got to be painful, torture, dystopia? Got to be. But Elena's, she's endured it.
John, I think
done
anybody
amazing.
who knows me, anyone on here who knows me is probably sympathizing for you and with you.
Oh, it's the other way.
That's just one-sidedness.
There you go.
You took both sides.
That's
You
one side.
guys.
I knew Ike would challenge to balance that. If you're supporting me, Ike would come in as an act of love. He would make sure that was balanced. Thank you, Ike.
I love you. You're welcome.
I love you too. On my 65th birthday, I went surfing in Hawaii, and Ike was there, and Lena was there, and Brisha was there, and I think Danny was there. Ernest wasn't. That's right before Ernest appeared. Well, we've known Ernest for many years, but Brisha's man is on today with us today, but he hadn't come into the equation yet. Just about a month later, he came into the equation. When was it? 2 weeks later? 3 weeks later? 4 weeks later, he appeared. 5 weeks later, he appeared. Now, soulmates. So let's put this diagram here. Here's the Earth, and here's the atmosphere again. Atmosphere means sphere of the soul. And here's the higher mind down here on the Earth. And this is the broad-minded, as we said. And this is the narrow-minded. This is the terrestrial sphere where there's trial. And this is where there's harmony. This is neither positive nor negative. This is either positive or negative. Judgment. Now, this was an androgyny as I said. And this was where we have two soulmates. So I'm just going to draw another soulmate here. These were called life sparks in the earliest writings. And these were called spiritual, celestial, astral bodies, 𝐒𝐔𝐈𝐒, quantum spiritual, celestial, astral bodies. The quantum body was by Deepak. The spiritual body is by the New Testament, Corinthians. Celestial body is also Corinthians. The astral body is 𝐒𝐿. It's called the higher Akka body by Huno, Max Freedom Long. There's 100 names. There's different names for this body, which is the image when we're in a transcendental state. When you go to the breakthrough experience and you enter into a transcendental state, you see the individual in front of you and you don't see the room. You move from a phenomenal to the nominal level and you see an image of the individual, and that's the nominal. That's the spiritual, celestial, astral body. That has no boundary in space-time. Now, I want you to imagine that this is a wave at a certain frequency, and these are waves at a lower frequency. Now, frequency equals 1 over the wavelength, lambda, and lambda equals 1 over the frequency. So if you increase frequency, you elongate, you shorten the wavelength. And if you increase wavelength, you lower the frequency. So they're inversions. So here we have high frequency. Down here we have low frequency. Low frequency means the speed in which you see both sides of an event is long. And these were called sequential contrasts by Want. And these were called simultaneous contrasts by Want. Simultaneous contrast, it means you see both sides of an event simultaneously. Down below, you see one side of an event, and then you're blind to the other side. And then later on, you see the other side of the event. Raise your hand if you've been highly infatuated, and 6 months later you went, now I can see the bitch or the bastard, but I couldn't see the bitch or bastard before. I was too infatuated to see it, but too late, because you've epigenetically, when you impregnated them during the infatuation phase, you guaranteed epigenetic coding of all the traits you despised about them that you're going to be haunted by the rest of your life to teach you to love both sides before you make love, right? Or to get the fuck out of town before they find out, one or the other. I'm joking a bit. Now, these two states are entangled. Now, when you have entanglement, you can have a photon split into a positron and a negatron or electron, or you can take a photon and split into a photon and a photon, but with twice the wavelength and half the wavelength. This one will fluctuate this way, and this one will fluctuate this way. So if this one is vertical, this will be horizontal, but they'll be entangled. So what that means is that this wave and this wave are particles of light. This is a photon, this is a photon. If this is a horizontal one, this is a vertical one, or vice versa. But the positive and negative within them are entangled between them as positive and negative personas. So all personas are entangled. And personas are nothing more than conscious and unconscious halves. And all soulmates are entangled as vertical and higher horizontal light. Because a soulmate is a disowned part. These are called disowned states. Now, light in itself is unpolarized. Divine light is unpolarized. because it's spaceless and timeless. Once it propagates in space and time, it can become polarized. You use polarized glasses to get rid of glare. Glare is unpolarized light. Polarized light is glareless. That's why there's slits in polarized glasses to block out light vibrating this way, but not one way, and you get light. Now, when these two soulmates are entangled, it doesn't matter how far apart they are inside the solar system to be related to each other. But each one has to integrate the parts back into photons to be able to make contact with this other soulmate. So please make a note of this. Every time you do the DiMartini method and you integrate the personas and become present and have a moment of grace and love, in that moment, you become aware of your soulmate. Now, your soulmate is always follows the law of the one to many. If you get self-righteous, you move towards one. As you get self-righteous, you move towards many. One, many. One soul, many personas. So I'll show you this. This is one soul, many personas. Anytime you go up, you're moving towards the one. And people that move towards the one look for more options in relationship. When they're towards the many and they're feeling self-depreciated, that means that they're infatuated with somebody and they're the underdog. They're automatically looking for the one, because the one option, one only. So when you dilute yourself and go down, you seek the one. When you go up, you seek the many. All relationships are striving for a balance of one and many. Monogamy, polygamy, or one and many. So if you're infatuated with somebody, you're going to be the underdog. You're going to be looking for the one. I found my one. If you're the overdog, you're going to be keeping your options open for the many. Because the soulmate is a balance of one and many, as Aristotle described. So this is actually the one and the many joined together. Within the one is the many, and within the many is the one. Here, the one is in the many, and here the many is in one. That means within the one soul comes many personas, and out of the many personas comes one soul. So anytime you're in a state of grace, you're moving towards the one, and you're going to keep your options open. And anytime you're going down and you're the underdog, you're going to be searching for the one. They're going to be looking for the many. And anytime you're the overdog, you're going to be probably the overdog, you're going to be searching for the many, not the one. So the purpose of the marital process is to learn how to own the disowned parts. So the purpose of marriage is to own disowned parts, to create androgyny, and to create the one and the many, to balance the law of the one to many. So if you're cocky, they'll humble you. If you're humble, they'll build you up. So if you build yourself up, they'll beat you down. If you beat yourself down, they'll build you up. They'll try to get you back into authenticity. If you start looking at other people, they'll try to get you to look at one. If you smother them, they're going to try to get you to look at many. Back off. Maybe you need a date. If you're the infatuated one and all you want is the one, they're going to say, why don't you date some people? Let's just not rush this. The underdog is looking for the one and the overdog is keeping options for the many. But when you have a balance and you equilibrate the mind and you own your two sides androgynously, you'll feel the presence of your soulmate. You realize nothing's missing. Down here, things appear to be missing. Up here, nothing's missing. At the level of the essence of the soul, nothing's missing. At the level of the existence of the senses, things appear to be missing. So most people, what they call a soulmate, the soul doesn't need a mate. Nothing's missing. It already has it incorporated in itself. But the incarnating higher mind in the body, which has conscious and unconscious splits, now looks for mate. And it procreates children of disowned parts. That's why you'll see that one of the parents and the other parent, if they have two kids, one will tend to follow the mother and one will follow the father in their behaviors. And you'll go, fuck, you're just like your God blessed mother. While you're infatuating, you're making love, but the resented part shows up in the kids to teach you how to love the parts you were overlooking, to make sure that you're whole again. So the purpose of relationship is to teach you how to be authentic and to guide back to your soul. The purpose of business is to guide you back to your soul. The purpose of relationships in society is to guide you back to your soul. Everything is trying to get you back into equanimity and equity, authenticity of the soul. In fact, everything that's going on in this world, everything that's going on this planet that you're going to see in your life ultimately is trying to get you authentic, to be soulful, mindful, fulfilled, graceful, light. The soul is light. Your mind is enlightened when it realizes that. Nothing's missing. How we doing? You got a picture of this, Elena?
Got it.
Thank you. Okay. Raise your hand if you got at least a couple ideas. Now 2 ideas out of today. Hi, Miguel. I don't think I ever said hi to Miguel. I don't know if I saw him earlier. Some people have already logged off, so. Elena, the ones that logged off early, don't send them that $1 million cash of DeMartini money.
We already offered